Sign the damn papers, Evelyn. Don't you dare humiliate this family in front of our guests.
My father's voice didn't shake. It commanded. Arthur Vance stood there like a king, ignoring the fact that the kingdom was built on my sleepless nights. We were in the VIP lounge of the Metropolitan, surrounded by New York's elite, but all I could see was the predatory glint in my brother's eyes. Dominic leaned over the table, shoving a gold fountain pen into my hand. It's just a signature, sis. 75% of the equity for the visionary. That's me. You get to keep your little title and a paycheck. Be a team player for once. I looked at the pen, then at the man I'd shared a womb with. My blood wasn't flowing. It was boiling. A team player? I spat the words back, my voice cutting through the jazz music like a razor. I spent 12 years in a windowless lab developing the core AI architecture while you were busy snorting lines off yacht decks in Ibiza. You don't even know what a neural network is, Dominic. You think it's something you catch in the ocean. Watch your mouth, my mother, Eleanor, hissed, grabbing my wrist with a grip like cold steel. Your brother has the charisma. He has the face for the $85 million buyout. Nobody wants to buy a company from a girl who smells like ozone and burnt coffee. Give him the rights, Evelyn. It's his birthright. I ripped my arm away from her. The anger that had been a dull ache for 3 decades finally fractured. His birthright? I laughed, a harsh, jagged sound that made a nearby socialite flinch. I am the architect. Every line of code in that $85 million deal is mine. Every patent mine. He's a suit with a spray tan, and my last name. Dominic's face turned a violent shade of crimson. He slammed his fist onto the mahogany table, rattling the crystal glasses. You're nothing without us. Who paid for your first server? Who gave you the garage to rot in? We invested in you, Evelyn. You're just the labor. I'm the bank! I roared back, stepping into his personal space until our noses almost touched. I paid back that garage rent 10 times over when I cleared your gambling debts in 2022. I paid for Mom's facelift. I paid for Dad's vintage Porsche. You aren't investors, you're parasites. The room went deathly silent. My father stepped forward, his eyes narrowed into slits. You are an ungrateful, hysterical girl. If you don't sign those papers by the count of 3, I will strip your name from every board, every trust, and every social circle in this city. You will be a pariah. 1. Dominic smirked, holding the pen out again. Think about your career, Evelyn. It would be a shame if everyone found out you stole the concept from your brilliant brother. 2. My mother whispered, her eyes devoid of any maternal warmth. Don't be a martyr for a few ego points, darling. Just sign. I looked at the documents. I felt the weight of 12 years of being the soil. So Dominic could be the tree. 3. My father finished. I grabbed the fountain pen. For a split second, Dominic's face lit up with a triumphant, greedy glow. I didn't sign. I jammed the nib of the pen into the center of the contract and ripped it downward, tearing the thick parchment in half with a violent screech. Then, I grabbed Dominic's $500 glass of scotch and poured it over the shredded remains. There's your signature, I snorted, tossing the broken pen at his chest. You bitch! Dominic lunged toward me, but I didn't flinch. I stood my ground, my heart hammering a war drum against my ribs. Touch me, and I'll leak the raw server logs tonight, I threatened, my voice low and lethal. The buyers will see exactly who wrote the code and who was busy ordering Uber Eats. Try me, Dominic. I have nothing left to lose, but you have 85 million reasons to stay very, very quiet. I turned to my parents, who stood frozen in shock. Arthur, Eleanor, I said, using their first names like a cold slap. Consider the Evelyn subsidy officially terminated. Don't call me when the credit card companies start circling. I'm not the soil anymore. I'm the drought. I walked out of that lounge, my heels clicking like a countdown on the marble floor. Every step away from them felt like a shackle snapping. As I hit the frigid New York night air, I pulled out my phone. My hands weren't shaking from fear. They were vibrating with the sheer power of my own rage. I hit the speed dial for the one person I knew could help me burn their world down. "Sterling," I said when the lawyer answered. "They tried to strong-arm me. It's time. I want the forensic audit on the family trust started tonight. I want every cent they've bled from me accounted for. And Sterling, don't be professional. Be a shark." The silence of my apartment was a physical weight, thick enough to suffocate. It wasn't the peaceful quiet of a sanctuary. It was the eerie stillness of a bunker after the first wave of fire had passed. I sat at my workstation, a scarred metal desk that had seen more sweat than any boardroom in Manhattan, and watched the snow pile up against the window like white ash. My phone on the desk was vibrating so violently it threatened to rattle off the edge. "Mom, Dad, Mom, Dominic." A string of texts from my brother flashed on the screen, each one more unhinged than the last. "You're dead, Evelyn. I'm calling the board. Give me the decryption keys or I'll have you arrested for corporate sabotage. Don't play with me." I didn't delete them. I archived them, digital pebbles for a future legal sling. My eyes burned from the blue light. My mind drifted back to a rainy Tuesday in Seattle, 12 years ago. I was 19, fresh out of a coding boot camp I'd paid for by waitressing double shifts until my feet bled. I had just finished the prototype for the Vance algorithm, the very architecture Dominic was now trying to sell for $85 million. I remembered running into the living room, my laptop shaking in my hands. "Dad, look! I figured out the latency issue. This could change how high-frequency trading works." Arthur hadn't even looked up from his newspaper. Dominic, then 20, was lounging on the sofa, complaining that the leather seats in his new BMW felt too stiff. "That's nice, Evelyn," my father had said, his voice as flat as a dead pulse. "But your brother needs help with his business management essay. Why don't you put the toy away and help someone who actually has a future in leadership? You're a technician, honey." He's the face. "But Dad, this is a breakthrough." "Evelyn," my mother had interrupted, her voice dripping with that faux maternal warmth she used like a garrote. "Being a good sister means being the soil so Dominic can be the tree. He has the presence, the name. You have the technical knack. If you give this to him, he can take our family to the top. Do you want to be the reason we fail?" I had believed her. I had spent the next 12 years being the knack in the shadows while Dominic became the visionary on magazine covers. I had built the engine while he took credit for the speed. A sharp ping from my laptop snapped me back to the reality. An email from the lead counsel of Apex Holdings, the conglomerate buying the company. Subject: urgent. Claim of IP contention. "Ms. Vance, we have received a formal notice from Dominic Vance claiming that the core architecture was developed under a work-for-hire agreement he authored. Until this is resolved, the $85 million acquisition funds are frozen." A harsh, jagged laugh escaped my throat. Work for hire? Dominic couldn't even format a PDF without calling me for help. I dialed Sterling, my lawyer. "They're moving faster than I thought," I said, my voice cutting through the dark room like a blade. "Dominic filed a work-for-hire claim. He's trying to lock me out of my own brain." "He's desperate, Evelyn," Sterling's gravelly voice responded. I did some digging. Your father leveraged everything. The penthouse, the Hamptons house, even your mother's jewelry. As collateral for a $12 million predatory loan Dominic took out to cover a failed crypto venture. The payment is due in 72 hours. If this deal doesn't close, they're on the street. The golden child had been a black hole, and they were trying to use my life's work as the plug. Sterling, I don't just want my 75% back, I said, looking out at the city. I want to see the loan documents. If my name is anywhere on that debt without my consent, I'm calling the FBI. I want them to realize that the soil has just turned into quicksand. Careful, Evelyn, Sterling warned. That leads to prison for your own family. They stopped being my family the moment they tried to sell my soul to save their furniture, I snapped. I hung up and turned to my second monitor. It was time to show Dominic what a visionary really looks like when the lights go out. My fingers flew across the keys, activating a maintenance lockout I'd hidden in the kernel years ago. Within seconds, the Vance AI dashboard went pitch black. A single line of red text appeared. Critical system error, authorization required. Contact Chief Architect, Evelyn Vance. My phone rang instantly. Dominic. I watched it vibrate, a grim, satisfied smile tugging at my lips. The tree is thirsty, I muttered. Let's see how long it lasts when the soil stops feeding it. The blizzard howling outside my Manhattan window was nothing compared to the storm currently detonating on my phone. By 8 a.m., the predatory silence of my apartment had been replaced by the frantic vibrations of a family realizing their meal ticket had just gone offline. My laptop screen was a symphony of red. The lockout was holding. Dominic's work-for-hire claim had frozen the acquisition money, but my counterlock had frozen the product. Without me, the Vance AI was nothing but an $85 million paperweight. There was a thunderous pounding at my front door. Not a knock, a rhythmic, violent assault. Evelyn, open this door right now! My father's roar echoed through the hallway, muffled by the heavy oak. I know you're in there! Don't you dare hide like a coward after what you've done to your brother! I didn't rush to the door. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my black coffee, letting the heat sear my throat. I wanted them to wait. I wanted them to feel every second ticking toward their $12 million doom. I finally stood up, smoothed my silk robe, and unlatched the deadbolt with a chillingly calm click. Arthur and Dominic practically tumbled into the room. My father looked like he was on the verge of a stroke, his face the color of an overripe plum. Dominic, however, looked worse. The golden boy was trembling, his $3,000 suit wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot and wide with a panicked, animalistic desperation. You shut it down! Dominic screamed, lunging toward my desk. You killed the dashboard! Apex just called me screaming about a system-wide failure. Turn it back on, Evelyn, now! I stepped in front of my workstation, my posture as rigid as a skyscraper. Get out of my face, Dominic. You're getting spittle on my monitors. Do you have any idea what's at stake? My father bellowed, his finger hovering inches from my nose. That loan payment is due in less than 72 hours. If Apex pulls out because of your technical glitch, we lose everything. The houses, the reputation, the legacy. Your legacy, I interrupted, my voice a calm, lethal contrast to his hysteria. Not mine. You spent a decade telling me I was just the technician while you fed Dominic's delusions. Well, the technician has gone on strike. And since Dominic is the visionary, why doesn't he just fix it himself? Go on, Dom. The terminal is open. Show Dad how brilliant you are. Dominic looked at the screen, filled with lines of complex Python and C++ code. His jaw worked silently. He looked like a man trying to read an ancient alien language. I I don't have the administrative overrides, he stammered, his bravado crumbling like wet sand. You changed the encryption protocols. That's illegal, Evelyn. It's corporate sabotage. It's intellectual property protection, I countered. You claimed the work was yours under a work-for-hire agreement. I'm simply waiting for you to prove it by logging in. If it's your work, you should know the back doors, right? Or did you forget how your own brain works? Enough of this gamesmanship! Arthur slammed his hand against the wall, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Evelyn, I am your father. I am telling you to unlock that system. We are family! Family? I stepped toward him, my eyes blazing with a decade of repressed fury. Family doesn't forge a daughter's signature on a $12 million predatory loan, Dad. Family doesn't use their child as collateral for their brother's gambling debts. The room went cold. My father's eyes flickered, a brief, microscopic tell of guilt. I don't know what you're talking about, Arthur muttered, but his voice had lost its thunder. Sterling found the documents this morning, I lied. I was still waiting for the forensic scan, but the look on his face told me everything I needed to know. The signature on the Vance Trust Amendment. It's a forgery. That's bank fraud, Dad. That's a felony. We did it for the family, my father shouted back, trying to regain his footing. Everything we have is because we stood together. You're being selfish. Selfish? I walked to the door and flung it wide open. The hallway was cold and empty. I'm not the soil anymore, Arthur. I'm the storm. Get out. Evelyn, please, Dominic whimpered. The people I borrowed from, they aren't bankers. They're dangerous. If I don't pay, then I guess you should have learned how to code, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that felt like ice. Get out before I call the police. I slammed the door and leaned my back against it, my heart hammering like a trapped bird. I was shaking, but for the first time, it wasn't from fear. It was from the intoxicating rush of finally saying no. I walked back to my desk and picked up the phone. Sterling, I said, my voice steadying. They were here. They confessed to the debt. I want the police report ready by noon. We aren't just suing for the company anymore. We're going for the throat. By noon, the blizzard had transformed Manhattan into a ghost of glass and steel. Inside my apartment, the air felt just as frigid. Sterling had sent over the first batch of scanned documents, and the reality was even more grotesque than his initial report. My parents hadn't just forged a signature, they had dismantled my entire financial future while I was busy building their empire. The phone rang. It wasn't my family this time. It was an unknown number with a DC area code. Evelyn Vance, I answered, my voice tight. Ms. Vance, this is Marcus Thorne, lead auditor for Apex Holdings. A deep, clipped voice replied. We've been trying to reach your brother for 3 hours. The system is still dark, and our investors are pulling the plug in exactly 6 hours. What is going on? I leaned back, staring at the red error message on my monitor. Mr. Thorne, you're talking to the wrong person. According to the work-for-hire claim my brother filed, I'm just a disgruntled former contractor. Surely the visionary of the company can handle a minor server lockout. There was a long, heavy silence. Ms. Vance, we aren't idiots. We know whose fingerprints are on the architecture. Dominic is currently in a conference room downstairs, having a panic attack because he can't even remember the admin password. If this deal dies, Apex will sue the Vance estate for fraud. That's an $85 million liability. Then I suggest you tell Dominic to start praying, I said, my heart hammering, because I'm not lifting a finger until my ownership is restored to 100% and my family is legally barred from the company. I'll call you back, Thorne snapped, and the line went dead. I didn't have time to process the call before my doorbell rang. Not a violent pounding this time, but a soft, desperate scratching. I looked at the security camera. It was my mother, Eleanor, huddled in a mink coat I had paid for 3 Christmases ago. I opened the door just a crack. "I told them to stay away, Mom." "Evelyn, please," she sobbed, her perfectly manicured face ruined by streaks of mascara. "They're going to take the house. The men Dominic borrowed from. They showed up at the penthouse an hour ago. They told Arthur that if the money isn't in escrow by Friday, they'll start liquidating our personal safety." I felt a momentary flicker of the old Evelyn, the one who wanted to fix things. I suppressed it with a surge of cold fury. "And whose fault is that? You let him gamble with my life. You watched him steal my work." "We did it to keep him afloat!" she shrieked. "He's your brother! He's fragile, Evelyn! You've always been the strong one! He needed the win! Why can't you just give him this one thing? Because this one thing is my entire life!" I screamed back, the rage finally spilling over. "Why is his fragility more important than my reality? You treated me like a battery, Mom. You plugged me in, drained me dry, and now you're upset that the light went out? I am not a sacrificial lamb." "You're a monster," she whispered, her eyes turning cold. "To do this to your own mother. We gave you everything." "You gave me a desk and a deadline," I spat. "Now get out. If Dominic's sharks are circling, maybe he can visualize a way out." I slammed the door and locked it. I looked at the documents Sterling had sent. There it was. The Vance Trust Amendment. My signature, dated 2 years ago. It was a good forgery, but the E was too looped, too much like my mother's script. They hadn't just used me. They had erased me. My laptop chimed. A new email from Sterling. Subject: Forensic results. Urgent. "Evelyn, I found a secondary offshore account linked to your father. He's been siphoning the R&D budget for years to pay for Dominic's failed startups. If Apex finds out, they won't just pull the deal. They'll file criminal charges for embezzlement." I sank onto the floor, the cold tiles pressing against my skin. My family wasn't just broke. They were criminals. I picked up the phone and dialed Marcus Thorne back. "Mr. Thorne," I said, my voice steady, "I don't want the $85 million deal anymore. I want a hostile takeover. I want every share Dominic and Arthur own, and I want it for the price of their legal immunity. Tell them it's the only way they stay out of a jumpsuit." "I'll talk to the board," Thorne replied. "But Evelyn, you're playing a dangerous game." "I'm not playing a game, Marcus. I'm conducting an audit, and the Vance family is officially bankrupt." The next morning, the blizzard had settled into a deceptive, sparkling calm. I sat in Sterling's glass-walled office, the Midtown skyline looming behind him like a jury. On the mahogany table sat the execution file, 2 inches of paper that proved my family had treated my existence as a line of credit. "They didn't just siphon the R&D funds, Evelyn," Sterling said, sliding a spreadsheet toward me. "They used your identity to open 3 shell companies. Dominic has been buying services from himself using the acquisition bridge loans. It's a classic circular fraud. Total theft, $14 million. I stared at the numbers. 14 million. That wasn't just a mistake. It was a systematic betrayal. "And the loan for 12 million? The one the sharks are coming for?" "That's the kicker." Sterling leaned in, his eyes cold. "Your father co-signed it using your primary patent as collateral. If the $85 million deal with Apex fails, the patent, the soul of your AI, automatically transfers to a holding company owned by a group of private lenders in Jersey. The kind of people who don't care about software, just the liquidation value. I felt a surge of nausea followed by a blinding white-hot clarity. They hadn't just put me in the soil. They had sold the land I was standing on. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a FaceTime call from Dominic. I looked at Sterling, who nodded. I swiped to answer. Dominic's face appeared, and for a second, I almost didn't recognize him. He was sitting in the back of a car, his hair disheveled, a dark bruise blooming along his jawline. Behind him, I could see the blurry silhouette of a man who definitely wasn't a Vance.
Evie, please.
He choked out, his voice trembling with a terror I had never heard before. They're here. They're with me right now. They know the system is locked. They told Dad that if the transfer doesn't happen by 5 p.m. today, they're taking me to a private meeting in the Newark docks. Where is Dad, Dominic? I asked, my voice as flat as a dead heart. He's at the bank, trying to beg for an extension, but they won't listen, Dominic sobbed. Evelyn, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry about the papers, the forgery. I'll give it all back. I'll sign whatever you want. Just unlock the servers. Tell Apex the glitch is fixed. I looked at my brother, the golden boy, who had been polished by my mother's praise until he believed he was immortal. He looked pathetic. He looked like the fraud he had always been. You don't have anything to give back, Dominic, I said, leaning into the camera so he could see the lack of mercy in my eyes. You spent it all. You spent me all. Evelyn, they're going to kill me, he shrieked. I looked at Sterling. He held up a document, the total relinquishment of assets. Here is the deal, Dominic, I said, my voice cutting through his whimpering like a guillotine. I have a contract here. It strips you and Arthur of every share, every title, and every cent remaining in the Vance estate. It grants me 100% control of the company and the patents. In exchange, I will authorize Apex to release a bridge payment directly to your creditors. You'll be broke. You'll be homeless, but you'll be alive. But the penthouse? Mom's jewelry? Gone, I snapped. You traded them for your life. Sign it digitally in the next 5 minutes, or I hang up and block this number. The clock is ticking. Visionary. What's your move? Dominic stared at me, the reality of his total annihilation finally sinking in. He looked at the man in the shadows behind him, then back at the screen. Send it, he whispered. Send the link. I ended the call. My hands were perfectly steady. He'll sign, Sterling said, watching the digital tracker. He has no choice. But Evelyn, what about your parents? They'll lose everything, too. They chose their favorite child, I said, standing up and grabbing my coat. Now they can live with his consequences. Family should be your rock, not a reason for people to bleed you dry. Don't be the soil for someone else's tree if all they do is take without ever looking back. Be kind, but set your boundaries. Don't let family be an excuse for your mistreatment. Own your worth. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, please like and comment below. Don't forget to subscribe for more gripping stories coming your way. See you in the next one.